There is a famous actor called Jason Momoa, and I've met him. As I'm about to describe, I ended up spending a remarkably long period of time standing next to him while he was having conversations with other people. Now, this is a totally surreal situation. I'm not a fan of Jason Momoa. I didn't choose to be in this situation. Um, at the end of this experience, I said to Melissa, I never imagined I would say this. I never imagined I'd be in a position to say this. I've got to tell you something. I feel like I'm way more attractive than Jason Momoa. This was several years ago before coronavirus, when Jason Momoa was very much at the height of his fame. Fame from Game of Thrones, fame from the Aquaman movie. He was absolutely the pinnacle of his career, as a famous actor who was regarded as handsome. And at that time, perhaps you could say then as now, going through border controls at an American airport was a very lengthy, it's a very time-consuming experience. So Jason Momoa comes up and stands right next to me in the line to go through security at an airport, which is remarkable and strange. And he does it because there was another guy standing next to me that Jason Momoa knew somehow from the film industry and specifically from music. So my guess is this is a musician who's somehow involved in making soundtracks, something like that. But it was obvious he was connected to live music, not just filmmaking or what have you. So Jason Momoa was really happy to see this guy. He hasn't seen him in a while. They're getting back together. So Jason Momoa comes over and kind of apologizes, for cutting him. Like, oh, hey, look, this is an old friend of mine. Do you mind if I stand here and talk to him? And I'm stuck in line, standing right next to Jason Momoa. Guys, I don't want to exaggerate this, but you know how it is in these airport situations. In total, by the end of this story, I think I was standing next to Jason Momoa for like 45 minutes. So I say, you have this weird experience in line standing next to him, and I get to hear the whole, I have no choice. I have to hear this whole conversation he has. And then I get through whatever it is, the security procedure. And at the next stage of things inside the airport, Melissa has to go to the bathroom. Now, going to the bathroom as a woman at an airport is much more time-consuming than it is as a man. It's like, okay, I stack up all the bags. Okay, I'll stand here and wait for you, and I can't move. I've got all our baggage and so on at this stage. I've got a lot to kind of look after. She goes into the bathroom, and I honestly was thinking, well, at least I don't have to fucking stand next to Jason Momoa anymore. And he and his friend, they come and stand next to me again. And it's like for another 15 minutes, I'm standing there. It's a good position to wait in front of the women's bathroom in this airport. And Jason Momoa and his friend are going on and on. And what they're doing is they're making arrangements to get drunk together. That's what they're talking about. And anyway, look, this is this totally fucking unexpected scenario. Jason Momoa is a guy who grew up playing team sports, playing hockey. I don't know how successful he was, but reportedly he was a physically large, strong specimen who was good enough at hockey. So he was some kind of athlete in team sports. The people consider him handsome. He went on from being an athlete to being a movie star, various stages in between. I know this because Kevin Smith reported a conversation he had with Jason Momoa, again, at an airport at random, where Kevin Smith asked Jason Momoa, like, oh, don't you ever feel like you can never be happy if you don't go back to playing hockey? And Jason Momoa just laughed. He was like, no. Being a movie star is way better. The reality is when you're standing next to a guy like Jason Momoa and you're listening to him talk for like 45 minutes, this guy has no sophistication, zero. He has no intellectual substance. His manner of speaking is embarrassingly childlike. He's not reading a script. This is him having a real conversation with a guy who's a real long-term friend of his. Jason Momoa very obviously has a long history of drug and alcohol use. I don't know anything about it. If I knew nothing about the guy, if I had never seen a TV show or a movie with him in it, and I was just staying next to him, I would be aware this guy is some kind of scumbag with a long history of drug and alcohol use. It's written all over his face, you know. And again, in real life, dealing with real people, what it's like to meet someone who has real intellectual substance, real character, who has something interesting to talk about and who talks about it in an interesting way, as opposed to talking to a bumpkin, no matter how muscular, like no matter how much muscle mass this bumpkin is carrying around, and a bumpkin with a history of drug and alcohol addiction, perhaps an ongoing history. The word history suggests something in the past that's over. We shouldn't say that. Someone who has a past and quite possibly a present and a future wrapped up in drug and alcohol addiction. Jason Momoa seemed like a really loathsome, disgusting character in person. Now, I'll also add a lot of these guys. Well, for one thing, Jason Momoa leans very heavily on computer editing of his image in movies like Aquaman. What he looks like in person, he doesn't look muscular. He doesn't look lean. He doesn't look athletic. He doesn't look impressive. He looks like an old, drugged out burnout. He looks, honestly, if you told me he was a homeless person, his manner of dress, his hair, his face, he looked awful. And again, it wasn't just a judgment based on his appearance. I didn't stand there staring at him, but I had to stand next to him and listen to this long conversation. A conversation then continued when I'm standing next to the bathroom, when he's arranging with this guy to go and get drunk, like right then. It's like, oh, can we go here at the airport? Can we go there? Like, where do you want to go get a bunch of drinks? It's certainly a remarkable thing that alcohol is served in airports and indeed on airplanes, but that's part of our cultural tradition. I think it is fair to say that Andrew Tate thinks of himself as an Andrew Momoa character. Fair enough. Andrew Momoa does not philosophize about the decisions he's made in life. He doesn't preach that other people should live the same way he does. Andrew Tate precisely does. Now, Andrew Tate advocates for other men to live the same kind of life he lives. Well, look, I don't even know how old Andrew Momoa was when I was in the airport. Okay, guys, we got to Google that. How old is Jason Momoa? Did I change them into one person? Did I say Andrew Momoa? Wow. So he's almost okay. He's exactly the same age I am. I had no idea. I thought he was 10 years older than me. All right. So that's interesting too. So Jason Momoa, I think he's both the same age and the same height as me. Sorry, you can see I didn't think about this stuff. I think that's the same height. What is this? Sorry, I'm Canadian, so I think of everything in meters. So Jason Momoa, I think he was a bit hunched over that day. I would guess he was 1 inch shorter than me. But whatever. According to the internet, Jason Momoa and I, same age, and maybe he's 1 inch taller than me. Maybe that's just his hair. Okay, so I'm shocked. I thought Jason Momoa was already 10 years older than me. I would attribute it to his drug use and alcohol use, but he has aged really badly, again, having seen him in person. What do you think Jason Momoa's life is going to be like at age 65? What do you think Andrew Tate's life is going to be like at age 65? Now, I'm actually not making the argument that you have to live every minute of every day, here and now, today, preparing for this more meaningful life you want to live when you're 65. But let me ask you, would 1 hour a day be too much? Would 2 hours a day be too much? I was finally reading. Oh, it's in the other room, so I can't get it off the shelf. I was finally reading Aristotle's Rhetoric last night. I finished the other book I was reading. I started reading Aristotle's Rhetoric. So that must be the most delayed book I've ever read or not read. Once in a while you have a book you start on again and again. The last time I was reading it, I had receipts in the book from a coffee shop in Thailand. So the last time I was reading this book, I was in Thailand. This book went to Thailand, it came back, and I've continued reading at the same point. Why am I reading Aristotle's Rhetoric? Okay, well, long story short, there's a better person that I can be. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not soon. There's a better person I want to be when I'm 65 years old. And it involves and requires learning and understanding the kind of material that's in Aristotle's Rhetoric, which is in many ways a boring book. Let me just disclaim. It's not, compared to other books Aristotle has written, it's not a page turner. There is a certain degree of misery involved in reading that particular book from Aristotle. So let's just admit that we're talking about a book that's boring. It's important, historically important, politically important, but it is quite boring. Okay. Tell me something. Would the world be a better place if every single member of parliament, if every single member of the Senate, every single member of Congress lived the life I live? Or let's be transparent. Let's say if they lived the life I am preaching that you ought to live. Perhaps I don't live up to, my own preaching. What if every single member of the Senate, Congress, Parliament was 100% sober, 100% vegan? What if every single one of them felt a kind of moral obligation to know what they're talking about, to do a certain kind of research that, as you know, it extends far beyond reading things like Aristotle's Rhetoric? What if they lived by the set of intellectual values that I've been preaching? Do you think the world would be a better place or a worse place if our political leaders lived up to my philosophy? Now, there are many different aspects of my philosophy I could bring in here. Do you think the world would be a better place if these people, instead of being religious fundamentalists, were, like myself, practicing nihilists, practicing this form of skepticism about history that I preach? I call it historical nihilism. It's a form of nihilism that isn't just based on the refutation of the existence of God. It's not just atheism, but a kind of engaged skeptical inquiry into history, understanding the way in which our cultural values and assumptions today are the product of a more or less arbitrary and iniquitous, historical process leading up to the circumstance we now find ourselves. Okay, interesting question. Would the world be a better place if our political leaders, right, philosophically had a lot more in common with Islam Mazar? Okay, what about a world where all of our political leaders instead practiced and preached the philosophy of Andrew Tate? What if every guy in Congress, every guy in Parliament was trying to live the life that Andrew Tate claims he lives, perhaps pretends he lives, and that he preaches you ought to live? It's immediately obvious this would be a disaster. This would be terrible for everyone. By all means, guys, audience participation here. I mean, if you disagree with me, let me know. Does anyone feel the world would be a better place if all these guys in Congress, all these guys in Parliament, etc., whichever political system you have, if all of them were trying to live the Andrew Tate lifestyle? And again, I'm not saying this to hate on Jason Momoa, but I do think he's an example of this. We could extend it as far as to say the Jason Momoa life also.